from the scriptures handed down to us in the Hebrew stream of our tradition, from the book of Genesis, these words. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth as they were created. In the day that the earth and the heavens were made, when no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for it had not yet rained, and there was no one to till the ground. But a stream would rise up from the earth and water the whole face of the ground. Then God formed the human from the dust of the ground and breathed into this one's nostrils the breath of life. And that one became a living being. It is the first thing we do in this world, and it's also the last. From our first breath to our last, we'll breathe billions of times and barely give it a thought. Only every once in a while we'll become conscious of our breath. Like those times when we're so cold we see vapor escaping from us as we exhale. Or we see something magnificent that just takes our breath away. Or something knocks the wind out of us. Or disease affects the functioning of our lungs. Or maybe we recognize that we haven't breathed from the bottom of our lungs for a very long time. Sometimes we notice our breath because we feel out of breath from exertion or anxiety or rushing or the sheer neglect of our body's need for conditioning. But mostly we're just barely conscious of breathing. Yet in one of the great myths of our tradition, one that shapes our understanding of our species, our story tells us we're this kind of hybrid creature, formed of earth and breath, some part dirt, some part wind, some part ground, some part spirit. And though this story comes second in our Bibles, it's thought to be older than the creation myth, the poem that opens the book of Genesis. And in this older story, the human species is not the climax of creation, like we are in that poem that opens our Bible. In this older story, we're literally in on the ground floor. In the imagination of our ancients, there's earth. And there's this stream of water that rises out of the earth and waters the dirt from which a creature comes to be. This creature is Adam, which literally means dirtling or earthling. This creature that's some combination of dust and breath, a spirited being. The ancient Hebrews, in the wisdom of their language, had the same word for wind and breath and spirit. Ruach was the magic ingredient that turned this dirt, this dust, this earth into something new, a new form of life, an earthling. And in the world of the story, in our myth, this new living being was breathed into being. It was inspired. The myth, of course, isn't about the science of how we came to be here. But it does tell us something about the nature of what we are, of who we are. With this gift of breath, this wind, this spirit, we join a great conspiracy. When we draw our first breath, we begin to breathe the same ancient air that the dinosaurs breathed, and we'll breathe the same atmosphere that our heirs will breathe generations after us. And while we breathe together. We conspire with all that is. Sadly, our contemporary understandings have turned conspiracy into a dirty word. We associate it with criminal intent. But if we can recover the natural meaning of that word, our birth joins us to a great conspiracy, and we're born to conspire, to breathe together as the human species with all that breathes. Our birth invites us to join the great conspiracy of life, to continue the creativity by breathing together. In that myth, we're the first breathing being, but not the last. We're not the apex born to dominate, we're just the first to breathe. And the only to breathe until, in the great timing of all good stories, others come along to breathe with us, to conspire with us. If you continue reading the myth, next comes the trees, our great partners in conspiring, those who use the waste product of our breath, those who will use the CO2 and breathe out oxygen. And then a little further along in the myth, other partners arrive to breathe with us, all the animals of the field and the birds of the air, and an Eve, an Isha, yet another partner for Adam. In the end, the ancient myth is populated by a diverse community of co-conspirators, each necessary to partner in the great conspiracy of life. But it takes intention to breathe together, to breathe with each other, to bring care and attention to how we conspire to nurture the garden of life as the myth imagines us to be born to do. I think that was part of the great legacy of Jesus of Nazareth. He inspired a community of co-conspirators, those who continued to breathe together his dream of a beloved community long after he had drawn his last breath. And we, as inheritors of that wisdom tradition, are among those conspirators. If we too were to receive our breath as part of the deepest nature within us, in our inhaling, we would more consciously receive the sacredness in our breath. And in our exhaling, we would give ourselves to Godding, to breathing sacredness and creativity back into the world with more of ourselves attached. And if we were to breathe together with such consciousness and unity of purpose, we would join that great conspiracy that began with our emergence on this planet and has been revised and revived again and again by the great wisdom teachers of all time and all traditions. Wisdom teachers like Jesus of Nazareth, who inspired a movement of kinship in an era of empire, a movement that continues to invite us to conspire with one another in ways that heal and transform our world. So here's today's invitation. In the ABCs for deeper living, in this time of silence we hold with one another, as we breathe together, I invite us to ponder, to what will we lend our breath? How can we participate more fully in the great conspiracy of love and creativity on which all life depends?